It's been quite a while since good old Lunduke has reviewed a distribution of Linux. Most Linux distribution reviews are boring as frozen snot and rather pointless. Because let's be honest, there's not a lot to differentiate most distributions from each other. But I'm making an exception here today. We're going to review OpenMandriva, specifically Rome, their rolling release. It's worth looking at. And I don't say that lightly. You can go back through my back catalog over the last few years and see how many Linux distributions I've actually been willing to review. There's not many. And this really all came about because a couple days ago, the president of the OpenMandriva Association got a hold of me. I've been talking a lot about problems with woke operating systems and DEI-infused politics and in corporate operating systems and Linux distributions and open source projects, and I was lamenting, where are the non-woke projects building operating systems? Where are the non-woke Linux distributions? I'm looking for them. So the president of OpenMandriva tossed me an email, and it was one of the best emails I've received in a very, very long time. It made me so utterly happy. He said, quote, "We are, of course, OpenMandriva, a Linux-based project. So we certainly use some code from the woke crowd, but in our own project, we're pretty much the opposite." He went on to explain basically everything you could possibly want to hear about how OpenMandriva is not woke. And I'm not saying that as their political project, because they're absolutely not. If you look through their website, there's no talking about politics. There's no page of codes of conduct where it has political ideals. None of that is on the OpenMandriva project. None of it at all. In fact, when I was asking him, he sent me an email and I did a follow-up with him. I'm like, hey, is there anything that you want me to point to? Any statements on your website about being not woke and whatnot? And he's like, are you kidding? I'm paraphrasing here. We're focused on the code. Like, we don't have time to make political statements. We're focused on the code. Like he reached out to me to let me know that they exist, but he's not making political statements. He's just making good code. And they run a meritocracy. They don't care who's got what politics. They're just focused on code. And it was the most refreshing thing. I absolutely love it. Like, if you could custom engineer in a laboratory the perfect set of responses to me, this would be it. Not only was he not woke and anti-woke and anti-DEI and all the awfulness that goes along with it, but he wasn't really focused on that. He was focused on the code. He was focused on being a meritocracy, just like you should be in a great software project. So this got my attention. I'm like, okay, I haven't played around with Mandriva for a long time, long time. And Mandriva has its roots in Mandrake Linux. And Mandrake is one of the granddaddies, right? They were focused at the very end of the 1990s is when they came about. And they were laser focused, Mandrake was, on being a usable Linux out of the box. It was good for pro users. It was good for us sysadmins and Linux enthusiasts. But for people who just wanted a solidly working, well configured, easy to go distribution with a live boot up environment like a live CD and whatnot, Mandrake was one of the first to really do that. And because of that, it captured my attention back then and so many other people. But Mandrake has had a whole lot of chaos and tumultuous waters since then. And I think for a lot of us, Mandrake and Mandriva and every fork of it since then has kind of fallen off of our radars. So I thought, you know what? I need to remedy this. So I sat down immediately. I downloaded their most recent version of OpenMandriva, both their stable release and their rolling release. They have Rock, which is their, release it every so often, but only when it's rock solid ready release, like an enterprise style release, and Rome, which is their rolling, updated, constantly bleeding edge release. And I downloaded both of them. I put them on a couple of different machines here, and I really, really enjoyed it. I don't want to give away spoilers for the end of the review, but I loved it. It's great. It's a great system. I'm going to walk you through a couple of pieces here, and you make up your own mind. If you're looking for a non-woke distribution, and even more importantly, in my opinion, a distribution focused on the code, on meritocracy, on not making political statements, on being completely big tech and independent of any other distro. I mean, they ship by default a version of the Chromium browser with all the googly stuff stripped out because they got to stay big tech free as they can. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that approach. So I'm gonna walk you through this here. And we're going to start with, and this maybe seemed like a really weird place to start, we're going to start with downloading OpenMandriva. Because if I'm being honest with you, the biggest weak point, this is crazy, of OpenMandriva is downloading it. That may sound nuts. And when you can go to almost any Linux distribution website, click a download button, and the ISO automatically starts downloading, not OpenMandriva. Because they've got a build process, and you can get some nightly builds of their rolling release, and you can get different variations, and you can download them from different places. And honestly, downloading it is kind of complicated. So I'm going to walk you through how I downloaded it. And you can follow along with that. So you go to openmandriva.org and you click on the download button, which takes you to this page. For those of you watching the video version, for those of you listening to the audio version, I don't know, go to the website and follow along as best you can. You go to this page, which lists all the different variations, rock and Rome, and their development branches, and their various spins, which are just community variations and whatnot, their server images, all that stuff, right? So I select Rome because I wanted to work specifically here mostly on the rolling distribution, right? Because I wanted the latest and greatest. Well, that then takes you to another page where you have a couple of different drop-down boxes essentially on the page where you can download variations on the rolling release. And the two primary ones are Rome Plasma and Rome Plasma Slim. And what it is point blank is KDE as the desktop environment, pre-configured out of the box. There's a big one and a slim one. The slim one is just the lightweight version. It's like about a gig smaller. They're both pretty hefty in size. They're both like a gig or two in size. They're both big. But Slim has less of the applications pre-installed. So if you wanted to do your own installation and to do just the pieces of software you wanted without all the extra stuff, you go with the Slim version. That's what I did because I'm a pro user. So I downloaded KDE Plasma Slim x86-64. I clicked on it. You'd think an ISO would download. You'd be wrong. This literally is the most convoluted download process I've ever seen in a Linux distribution, but I'm telling you right now, it's worth it. It's worth it. Stick with it. I hope they can clean this up because honestly, this is like the only downside to this distribution. So then you're taken to, if you're doing the rolling distribution, a build page where it lists the builds, the 5 or so most recent builds of the rolling distribution in reverse chronological order. So the top one is the most recent. Okay. So that you click on the ID for the top one, the little build number for it, and you'd expect an ISO to download. But again, you'd be wrong. You're then taken to a build page where that page, if you look on the right hand side, has an ISO file. There, you can download it. Now here's the thing though. That ISO file, the link to it links to an HTTP page without HTTPS. The problem there is some web browsers will throw an exception. They'll be like, no. I'm not going to download some 2 gig ISO file from a non-encrypted website. And some of them don't even give you an error message, depending on what you're running. Some variations of Chrome, Brave, and a few other browsers will just go, no, we're not going to download that. So you got to right click, save as, and be like, no, I'm telling you right now, save this file, and then it'll save it. Or you can use like wget or curl or something like that. Once you've downloaded, everything after that is cake. Everything after the download process is perfect. I kind of think of it like this. It's almost like an IQ test. Are you smart enough to deserve to run OpenMandriva? Because if you're smart enough and you can get through the point where you can download it, you're going to be treated to a beautiful distribution, an absolutely glorious distribution, and you're going to be thrilled with it. I mean, it's just fantastic. I'm going to go through some screenshots here. I loaded these up in QEMU just so that we could, see some screenshots here. I'm also running it on a Framework 13 laptop over here without issues. Hibernate works. Everything works. It worked out of the box perfectly. No complaints whatsoever. I also got the darn thing up and running on a Microsoft Surface Go. I had a couple issues with that at first, but I worked them all out. Honestly, compared to every other major distribution I've put on those two machines, it was as good or better. The Framework 13, in fact, some distributions I've installed on there have not worked with a couple of components out of the box, specifically Hibernate, right? Close the lid and actually hibernate. Whereas OpenMandriva worked out of the gate. Like, it set it up properly. It set up the swap with the hibernation option, set it up perfectly, and it worked right out of the gate. Others like Ubuntu, Hibernate did not work out of the box on that particular machine. So overall, it's as good or better than hardware wise than Fedora, Ubuntu, or Debian or anything else I've tried. But I've got this up in an emulator so I could take some easy screenshots here. When you boot into the live environment, it's real simple. All of us have had live environments nowadays. It's got a little, hey, how are you? Welcome page. And it tells you a little bit about what's new and all that sort of thing, yada, yada, yada. The installer. All right. Now the installer is pretty normal. They use the same installer. I can't remember. What was it? Was it Caligara? Or there's an installer package, an open source installer package that multiple distributions use. NixOS uses the same one. Some of the Ubuntu respins like Lubuntu and Kubuntu use the same one, and so does OpenMandriva. So they're using this here. It works fine. I saw no issues with it at all. The partitioning was fine, easy to use. It was great. The total install time on like my Framework 13 was like 4 minutes in total, beginning to end. It was a little slower inside of my virtual machine, but whatever. That's the install, and it's fine, and it was fast enough to make me happy. All right, so once the install is finished, and I had again no issues whatsoever. The standard little grubby boot screen is nice. It's pretty. But whatever, that's just the boot screen. Like, I don't care what my boot screen looks like all that much, but it looks nice. It looks all right. I'll go with it. And from there, your default desktop environment is KDE. So you're going to go ahead and log in as KDE, and it's fine. I'm not a huge KDE Plasma guy. I don't hate it, but it's not my preferred thing. It's a little too heavy for me. I like a more of a lightweight system. However, I found putting on other desktop environments and OpenMandriva was easy. I put on XFCE and ICE Window Manager, no issues whatsoever in either. So I was happy. I mean, between XFCE and ICE, I'm good, because I tend to like to make my desktops look like old retro desktops. And for me, there's just no better environments for that than XFCE and ICE. The available themes for those two desktop environments and window managers are just fantastic. Whether you want to make your system look like Windows 95 or an old Amiga or BIOS or whatever, doing it on those two is just great, and those installed super easy here. Here's an obligatory screenshot of NeoFetch because I don't know, why not? And again, by default it's all Plasma, so I'm showing you what it looks like by default with Dolphin, their window manager, and the performance was great. There was no issues, like there was just no problems I was running into. Everything worked great out of the box. This was quite possibly the nicest KDE experience I've had. And again, I don't dislike KDE. There's some KDE applications that I think are absolutely fantastic. Some of the Calligra suite is really good. KDE Live is a great little video editor. There's a lot of KDE applications that are really great. But just KDE Plasma as a desktop environment tends to be a little bit too, I don't know, big and bulky for me. I like it just a little bit less, a little bit lighter, a little bit leaner, more svelte. But it was great. Everything looked good. Their settings application was great. Again, they inherited a lot of stuff from the KDE folks, but they also did a bit of their own stuff, and it looks fantastic. There's really nothing to complain about here. They again, if you want to do um, all of your normal package management from the command line, it's using DNF. Now, I personally am more of a Debian guy because I've used Debian forever, so I've been used to apt. I've also spent a lot of years on SUSE and OpenSUSE, so whether I was using Yum or Zipper or whatnot, we've all been around enough different package managers to know what we're doing. My Pacman over on Arch, DNF is fine. I don't really have any love for DNF, but I don't have anything against it either. Like, I've got nothing to complain about here. If you want to install some software, you do a sudo DNF install the package. For example, like I want to install DOSBox. So I load up, sudo DNF search DOSBox, and here you go. Here's two different DOSBoxes that are DOSBox packages, DOSBox and DOSBox X. Great. Okay. So then I sudo DNF dash refresh to refresh it all, install DOSBox X because I need DOSBox. Gall darn it. If I don't have the ability to play my DOS games, I get to be a cranky Lunduke. So of course, that's like the first thing I do when I get a new phone, a new laptop, anything. I install DOSBox. I don't know. It's how I'm built. And boom, 20 seconds later, it was done. And boom, I launched DOSBox. There you go. Nice and easy. So DNF really is not that difficult to wrap your head around. They've got a graphical manager as well in there that sits on top of DNF, and it's super old school. Do you remember those of you who came up in the early Ubuntu years and the early Debian and GNOME years? You'll remember things like Synaptic, right? Synaptic was great because it was a graphical interface for searching and installing packages, but it wasn't overly bubblegummy. It was utilitarian. You know what I mean? Like you check all the things you want to install, and then you hit a button to apply your changes, and in the background it runs all the package manager stuff for you. And it was a very hardcore Unixy feeling graphical interface on top of your package management, and that's sort of like what you've got here with OpenMandriva. There's not like at least not that I saw like a overly polished, simplified store where they're making it super easy for everyone. But no, it's easy enough. Like, it's approachable for everyone, but it's power user, right? Like, it's you using it feels like a power user of old. It's like when we went back in time, 10 or 15 years and said, okay, what is the most usable way we could think of to make Linux and Unix and BSD environments? Let's do that right now, right? It doesn't have all this super crazy, flat, super easy interfaces of blah, blah, blah from Microsoft and Apple. Like, no. It's easy to use for slightly old school Linux. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like a throwback, but using new technologies. It's new, it's up to date, it's cutting edge, but with slightly older design sensibilities from like an engineering standpoint. I really appreciated that. Now, there's some downsides. Here. I already mentioned that downloading the darn ISO is tricky. That's the biggest downside I think I found to OpenMandriva is getting started and grabbing the ISO. Now, I asked some of the people involved in the project, and they told me they recommended at the moment grab the rolling release because it's the most up to date. Their rock release is a little bit older, and they've got a new version of their rock release that's coming out, I think, maybe in a matter of days. Like, it sounds like really soon. But if you want to right now, as of January 8th, grab the latest and greatest, you want to grab their rolling release, their Rome release. The other downsides is the KDE Plasma thing. If you're not a big KDE guy, this is KDE by default, right? The other downside here is that there's not a lot of marketing polish, right? On the website is where it really shines through, because once you get the distribution up and running, it's great. It's nice. It's an extremely polished, old school Linux, Unix, BSD workstation, but extremely polished. And I liked that. So what's weird is the cons here, other than the downloading the ISO one, are kind of also pros, right? So it lacking that marketing polish is kind of nice. Because they're not focused on the marketing. They're not focused on the presentation of the website. They're focused on making a great operating system and a great set of tools that go along with it, right? They're not focused on the marketing of it. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Honestly, it's a little bit of both, but it's refreshing, and I really like that. And the same is true with the KDE Plasma thing. If you like KDE Plasma, this is a really good KDE distribution. If you don't like KDE, well then KDE is going to be like your springboard to installing another desktop environment on Mandriva, which is more the boat that I'm in. And there's not really a problem with that. It's sort of like when people install Windows and Windows has Internet Explorer or Edge or something like that, and no one uses those web browsers, right? The only thing you use those web browsers for is to download another web browser, to download Chrome or Brave or whatever web browser you're going to download, right? And for me, KDE is like that. Like, I loaded up the KDE command line there, console, and just so that I could install XFCE. I'm like, okay, for me in this position, KDE is like my Internet Explorer. It's just used for that one tool and then never again. Again, I'm sorry to dog on. I don't mean to dog on KDE, guys, but that's just how I roll. But the biggest pros here for me, and I'm just gonna list out my pros. It's non-woke. And when I say non-woke, I don't mean that they take political stances. I mean that they take a hard non-political stance, right? Nowadays, you can't throw a rock without hitting a Linux distribution or another commercial operating system or something without it hitting one of them that's super, super woke, right? Where they take really hard DEI, extreme racist, crazy stances. And to see a distribution where the president of the association came out and was just like, we are not that. We don't do that at all. In fact, they kind of make fun of the woke stuff, but they don't make a big deal about it, right? There's not big presentations on their website. They're not trying to earn virtue points from any side. They're just trying to make good code. And that, for me, checks both of the check boxes, right? It's like, okay, I need something that's not crazy woke and DEI. Okay, check. And I want something that's focused on the code, that's focused on the merit of the contributors, is a meritocracy. Check. Beautiful. Now, realistically, are you going to choose your operating system based on nothing but that? Well, probably not. You're probably going to choose an operating system that does what you need, that runs the software you want, that you like using, that maybe looks nice, has good performance, on and on and on. There's a lot of criteria for choosing a good operating system. And maybe whether or not it's woke, or whether or not the people running it have the same politics as you, or whether or not they discriminate against people like you, maybe those don't enter into it too much. But it's nice to know, right? It's that cherry on top. It makes you feel good, because when you sit down and want to use your computer, even if you love every technical and design aspect of it, if you know that the people that built it hate you right? If they're super woke and they discriminate against you and they ban people who are like you from being involved in their project, and they make public statements about how they don't want people like you even using their software, which so many Linux distributions do that. I mean, NixOS and Elementary and OpenSUSE and on and on and on. You remember that. That sticks in the back of your craw, and you're like, well, that sucks. I don't want that. But you sit down to use OpenMandriva. And once you get past the fact that, okay, it works great, it's fast, it's performant, it's got everything I need, and I like it. It's a good system. It's a good technical system. Plus, the people don't hate me. It's great. It's great. The thing is, they're not making an extreme stance. They're not kicking other people out. They're not saying, oh, you're a leftist, well, you're kicked out. No, they're saying everyone's welcome. We're just not going to be political about it, and we're definitely not going to be woke. Beautiful. I couldn't. Huge pro for me. Huge pro. Because realistically, if OpenMandriva and some other distribution were equal on all other fields, right? Like they both looked good, they both worked good, they both have the same kind of software, like they all had the same, like for my usage, we're the same. Well, I'd go with OpenMandriva for that purpose, because I knew that when I sat down to use it, that the people behind the operating system don't hate me. It's a beautiful thing. It has most desktop environments available. So XFCE, GNOME, Ice Window Manager, just about all of them. I'm sure there's some it might not have, but the ones that I cared about were XFCE and Ice. Definitely those worked good. I know it has GNOME as well. I was just looking at a website of on their wiki of how to install GNOME on there. Works great. The DNF package manager works fine. It's super easy to use. They have a little tutorial on their wiki on their website that gets you up and running with it in like 2 seconds. It also supports Flatpak and app image out of the box, which is nice. I mean, having Flatpaks is really, really good. And again, I liked the lack of marketing polish. It feels a little bit like the best of old school Linux. And I really appreciated that. So I reached out to a bunch of the folks over in the OpenMandriva community, and the president of the OpenMandriva Association got back to me with his personal list of what makes OpenMandriva special, like why it's good. And he gave me a bunch of bullet points, and I'm just going to read them to you exactly as he sent them to me, and you can decide for yourself whether or not any of this rings true for you. Quote, I think we managed to build something that a non-technical person can install and use without limiting what an experienced user can do. Also, choice between fixed point and rolling release. That is nice. Lots of packages, all of them with the obvious exception of the non-free repository, built from source, so we know there's no hidden back doors, at least beyond those that might be hidden well in some upstream projects that will affect everyone. No spyware or adware, or Chromium is ungoogled by default. On top of that, Google's political decision to remove JPEG XL in order to push AVIF was reverted. Chromium supports both formats, the OpenMandriva Chromium. In progress, different spins for different purposes. There's no way to really build something that is a good server and at the same time a newbie-friendly desktop, so the CLI-only server spin must be different from the newbie-friendly Plasma spin. Okay. Releases happen when they're ready, not when a corporate overlord decides that, quote, we need the revenue from the new release in this quarter. That is nice. I mean, that runs very contrary. Like Ubuntu releases every 6 months, right? Like clockwork. And so many distributions, they do tend to be on a bit of a time schedule. Not OpenMandriva, they release it when it's ready. Readable, maintainable packages. See, for example, this. He gave one example. For a recent and therefore state-of-the-art example, automating away a lot of the boilerplate. Tooling for automatically tracking and trying package updates. Tooling for targeting even somewhat obscure devices, RISC-V and ARM dev boards without support for UEFI, etc., is getting in place in a reasonable way. ideas for better cross-compiling support, etc., being implemented. And this actually gets a little bit more technical, and I think this is kind of interesting. Bootstrapping scripts for new architectures. We can bring up a working root, etc., for a new CPU architecture or a different libc, etc., within a few hours without requiring another distro to start from. The C-Lang toolchain. Now, I want to point this out here, because this is truly an interesting technical tidbit. Most Linux distributions use GCC, the GNU compiler collection. It used to be the GNU-C compiler, but it's the compiler collection from GNU. Most of them use that as their compiler. Not OpenMandriva. They use C-Lang. Totally different. And there's a ton of technical reasons why they've decided to go with that. A lot of it is around, readability and all sorts of things. But it's an interesting change, and it's absolutely fascinating. Even uncommon programming languages like V are available. Cooker and Rolling, Cooker is their development branch, and their Rolling release are usually state-of-the-art and do not lag far behind upstream projects, especially with important libraries like glibc, OpenSSL, Qt, Boost, etc. A get-it-done attitude, quick decisions instead of loads of layers of management. I like that. Independent from big tech. And I want to point this out. This is a really critical thing. Many people think of various Linux distributions like, well, they're all independent from big tech. Well, Fedora's not. Fedora is part of big tech. Ubuntu's not. Ubuntu works very closely with many big tech companies, and in and of itself is a part of Canonical, which is becoming a pretty sizable tech company in its own right. OpenSUSE is more or less fully owned and governed by SUSE, which at this point is a kind of a big tech company. I mean, you go on, and most of the really big Linux distributions out there are deeply tied, if not completely controlled by big tech. And the ones that aren't, well, there are some that are really independent. There are. But there's a lot of them that take funding from big tech in very extreme ways or have big tech governance related to them. Not OpenMandriva. Ready to adopt some ideas long before they become popular, switching the main compiler to C-Lang, for example. Yet at the same time, not jumping on every hyped project of the day, like the current trend among some to rewrite the world in Rust. Not based on any other distribution, so we're free to do what we or the users want without having to either switch development models or talking an upstream project into doing what we want to do. I think that's a really big thing, because OpenMandriva is not a fork of Debian, right? I mean, how many distributions out there are sitting on top of Debian, or sitting on top of Ubuntu, which sits on top of Debian? Or there's a variety of them that sit on top of Fedora as well, or sit on top of Arch. OpenMandriva is really its own thing, right? It's its own distribution. It runs itself. It's bootstrapped to itself, and that is a beautiful thing. So but that's his impression of what makes OpenMandriva special. I recommend giving this one a try. I do. OpenMandriva.org. I'm not tied to the project. They're not paying me anything to say this. I just think, number one, it's a good distribution. I'm pleased with running it so far. But even more than that, it is unique in that it is a decidedly purposeful meritocracy. And they focus on the code, not on woke politics, DEI politics, and the like. And that makes it a little extra special. That really does. That makes it very special and worth checking out. So I big thumbs up here. I haven't done this in a while. I haven't come out and endorsed and operate a distribution or reviewed a distribution in some time, but this one is worth it. If you like the work of the Lunduke Journal, head over to lunduke.com, click on all the links, because they're all the best links. The best universal resource locators in all the land are located at lunduke.com. You can watch and listen and everything to the show all over the place. So we're on X, we're on Locals, we're on Rumble, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Patreon. You can download a DRM-free MP4 version from Itch. There are links all over lunduke.com. So however you want to enjoy the show, however you want to support the work of the Lunduke Journal, read the articles, whatever, it's all there. Thank you to all the subscribers who make it possible, and make it possible for me to do this without any big tech influence, without any advertising dollars at all. Couldn't do it without you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes, across this fine, fine inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.